While I play a ton of hockey myself, this was the first time I shot sports with something other than my GoPro. So here's how we're gonna make this fun. Based on these sample clips I took in 4K 60 and 1080 120, and we'll look at the still images afterwards. 60 seconds of disclaimers while I roll these. Number 1, wear a helmet if you aren't behind the glass. I didn't, and while I took extreme care in the penalty box not to shoot while sticks were close, while players were skating by, or while clearing attempts were made out of the zone, I will wear one next time if shooting from this spot, and I'll skip using the EVF in favor of the screen. Better safe than sorry. Not to mention, I missed a lot of action close by the bench that I could have captured if I wasn't so concerned about losing my teeth. Disclaimer 2, sports shooting noob here, second time saying it, for emphasis. While the R6 with this lens is my favorite combo, I don't want you to equate my praise with that of a recommendation from a 10-year sports shooting vet. If you are going to buy either though, using my affiliate links below is a huge help in funding other lens reviews on this channel. And 3, I shot some field hockey twice recently as well, after the ice hockey, both in daylight and at night. So while I don't show that off, I may reference those 2 shoots as part of my experience with this combo. Consider yourself fully disclaimed. Let's cover the settings, autofocus, the lens, burst mode, and megapixels. The hockey rink or basketball court that you think is well lit? Wrong. The shutter speed that you think will be sufficient to stop motion? Wrong again. If you like keeping your ISO near 100, shooting sports will just feel wrong. You are going to be starved for light. The good thing is that settings are simple even on manual because you have so little wiggle room with them. 1/1000th of a second seems to be a safe shutter speed. I tried cheating at 1/640th for some of the field hockey, but I saw blur around the fastest parts of the stick. Your aperture, at least for action shots, you'll want to keep wide open. So on the 70-200 f4, I parked my ass at a 4. More on that later. And so that leaves you reliant on ISO for light. And I shot between 2000 and 8000 when shooting ice hockey indoors. Many of the shots were between 3200 and 6400. For night field hockey under lights, more like 6400 to 10,000. During the day game, 250 through 800. You're still going to be underexposed at times, but you're going to head into Lightroom, lift up your shadows, and slap on a little noise reduction, tastefully. Don't overdo it. The idea is to embrace the noise. I like shooting landscapes and products, so I live the boring single point focus life where it doesn't move much from the center. For sports, especially with the R6, I think the goal is to let the camera do the work. I alternated between keeping that center point focus, which allowed me to frame the action appropriately as I followed it, and the eye detect autofocus. While it was occasionally difficult to snag the eye that you wanted to track, it does do an exceptional job when it does find the eye, or even faces or helmets during sports when it can't pick up on the eye. I prefer back button focus using the AF on button, and almost always shoot in servo. I keep my autofocus method to single point for that. In custom buttons, orange menu, page 4, I have the star or the AE lock button set to eye detect AF. So that means I can use single point autofocus when my thumb is held on the AF on button, and I can move my thumb slightly to the right to then enable eye tracking. And then on the AF magenta page 1, I have touch and drag set up. On page 3, you can experiment with the servo autofocus cases. I experimented a bit, but didn't have a hard preference here. I would be curious to hear yours below. On this channel, you've heard me sing the praises of the RF f4 lenses high, wide, and continuously. It's always been with the caveat that if you shoot weddings or paid events, the 2.8 might be for you. This is also going to apply for sports and wildlife. I don't, or at least I hadn't. I shot casually at a wedding for 2 good friends amongst all this sport shooting that I've done recently. And I get it now. f2.8 is nice. You could say that I've seen the light. f2.8 versus f4 is the difference between ISO 6400 and ISO 12800, and one of those is obviously more fun than the other, but don't let f4 stop you if that's what you have. The R6 and R5 handle high ISOs well, at least for Canons. Shoot with what you have, find the limits of your gear firsthand, and shoot daylight sports if you can. Doing some exposure math based on the settings that I had for some of the field hockey shots, you could definitely keep between ISO 800 and 1600 at f8, even at 1/1000th of a second, given similar lighting. Coincidentally, the aperture of the new RF 100-400 is f8 at the long end. That would be an excellent choice if you want to get into sunny sports shooting on native RF glass. And this is true because the 70-200 really doesn't cut it from a range perspective when you're shooting sports outdoors on a larger field. It was fine for the ice hockey rink, but for things like baseball, soccer, football, track, and other outdoor sports, you're really going to want longer than 200. Even the F11s are going to be usable on sunny days, and if you have the 24-240, put that to good use. First, shooting at 12 frames per second mechanical or 20 frames per second electronic is enticing coming from the RP, but beware. While it feels like a superpower in the field, it becomes a nightmare when you jump into Lightroom and have to cull through all these photos. You can very quickly end up with several thousand images. I did notice some distortion of the vertical glass separators when shooting electronic on the ice as I pan to keep up with the action. Mechanical at 12 is probably how I'll do most of my high-speed shooting moving forward to save on hard drive size and cut down the distortion. Though shooting at 20 does give you a better chance to catch things like the flex of a loaded stick. Also, you'll need fast SD cards. I shot the ice hockey with shitty micro SDs in adapters as my good cards were full at the time. I also deleted my RAWs already since I didn't plan to make this video. I've since gotten some new V60 cards, but you may actually need faster ones than that if you want to maximize your continuous shooting duration. I also got a nice speedy SanDisk Extreme, which has become a great small working drive. On the base M1 MacBook Air with the 256 gig hard drive, you basically need a drive like that so you can work off of larger folders. On that note, is the 20 megapixel sensor of the R6 enough? Yeah. While it might be nice to have a little bit more room to work with files in post, it's helpful because you're not going to be slaughtering your cards and hard drives when shooting in that continuous burst. Let me know if you'd like to see a follow-up video of me using the f2.8 on the 100mm macro for sports. And a huge shout out to the 100 subscribers that came in since posting my last video. I really appreciate you sticking around.